The next talk is ambiguous pattern variables by Gabriel.
Thank you. Okay.
Microphone.
Yeah. I would just say because I don't have a remote anyway. This is joint work with Luc Maranger and Thomas Refis, who's, I hope, somewhere in the room, maybe not. Yeah, Thomas is over there. Luc, he stayed in Paris because he's kind of, he didn't want to have some holidays in Japan. So, I start with the problem. I think Simon has gone, but he would like this kind of introduction. So suppose you have a type for formal expressions that contain either constants or a formal multiplication operation that takes two expressions and just represents it as data. And then maybe for some specific use case of this type, you have a notion of what it means to be a neutral for the operation you have in mind. For example, let's say for integers, the neutral is 1. And then you can write a smart constructor null, that is just a function that takes two arguments. And then, if one of them is, if it's of the form, AB, the arguments AB are the form const nv or v const n, where n is the neutral, then you can simplify it away and just return v. Otherwise, if it's just AB, you return null AB. And this is the problem. So I don't know if you see the problem with this code. It's certainly not obvious. When I was asked this question, I thought, oh, maybe it's a thing with the precedent, the syntactic precedence of when compared to the bar. No. It's the code has the nesting that it's suggested by the annotation. No.
The when is only for the second branch?
No, the one is for both branches, and so I will keep going because I'm not asking you to guess. So one way to see the problem is if you multiply const 2 with const 1, you expect const 2, and actually you get mul const 2 const 1. Okay. Before I explain the problem in detail, I will remind everyone what ML patterns are. So I'm working in a slightly simplified subset where I have the wildcard pattern. I have the as x, p as x matches p and also gives the name x to the scrutiny. Okay. I have the constructor pattern where k is the head constructor and p1, pn are the pattern for the arguments. And in OCaml, but I argue that it's a natural construction to have in any pattern matching language, you also have OR patterns as kind of first class. P or Q tries to match the scrutiny with P, and if it fails, it tries to match it with Q. And notice that the variable pattern you can express in this subset using as. Pair patterns are a special case of constructor pattern. And then when you might have forgotten about it, and I think your life is probably better for it, so you have to remember what it is. It's at the level of whole clauses. A clause is usually of form P arrow E, but you can also write P when G arrow E. G is a guard, so what you do is you try to match P, and if it works, you evaluate the expression G, that of Boolean type, and if it's true, you continue with E. If it's false, you go to the next clause. So it's a way to not take certain branches. Okay. So why do we have the problem in this case? Well, that's because what happens is that this is a P or Q pattern, const n, V or V const n. And so we try to match const 2, const 1 with this P or Q pattern. It matches the first one, so it's fine. So we test the guard. Is the guard true? No, the guard is false because 2 is not neutral. And then the clause failed and we move to the next clause. This is what is happening. Okay, so you may say, oh yeah, okay, I'm repeating that. Oh yeah, readers, actually, the problem with the code is not what's happening, is that readers expect another behavior, which is they kind of hope that whichever of P of Q is the right one will be tested by the guard, okay? This is intuitively what you hoped when you saw the code I showed previously. But the specification is very clear on the fact that P or Q is left to right, okay? It's left to right matching order, and G is tried only later once we know whether the whole pattern matches the scrutiny. As a side note, notice that specifying evaluation order is not always a good thing after all. So I'm trolling Andreas here in a slightly different situation. So if the order of P or Q was undefined, I could say, oh, this is clearly a program that has an undefined behavior because whether the guard is taken depends on which side is taken. So I should reject this program, for example. But the OKML semantics is perfectly fine with this program, and it has a clear meaning, but it's not the one you expect. So sometimes over-specifying is just as bad as not specifying. And also, well, I would make the case that it has to be rejected, which I cannot make now.
But then you have to specify the evaluation order.
So when people say that, they say, oh, but when you do P or Q when G, just implicitly, you are the compiler, you can turn it into P when G or Q when G. And unfortunately, that does not work. First, because, as I said before, this is perfectly valid OKML code, and someone might expect the surprising semantics, and I don't want you to change the meaning of the code from one version of the other, so no. Also because actually nested guards do not exist, as I said before, the when is at the level of the whole clause, you cannot put it one deep in a pattern, and there are reasons why we want to keep a simple pattern matching language with none of these evil guards inside them. Also, side effects in G would actually be duplicated because you cannot get in advance, and that's also a nope. And finally, P or Q is, in this case, it's at the head of the pattern, but it may actually be a pair pattern with an alternative deep inside. And then where do you move the guard? What is the semantics of the alternation that you want? It's kind of unclear. You don't want maybe alternation deep inside to have a big non-local behavior. That would be fairly strange. Okay. So I'm not going to fix this code. So why am I talking to you about it? Because at least we can complain about it. So we want, when this kind of stuff happens, we want a warning. Okay? Because it's very likely that even though your code has a perfectly specified behavior, it's not the one you want, and there is maybe a bug in your program. So we want to warn when there exists a value that may match P in several different ways, and whether the guard is taken or not depends on which way is chosen by the pattern matcher. And so I will not deploy a SNT solver to reason on the guard, so I'm just checking whether one of the variables used by the guard is ambiguous in the sense of the first item. So some examples. This is not a problematic code example, because whichever side of P or Q is taken, A will also always be bound to the same value. This is also not a problematic example, even though syntactically there are two occurrences of A, it's always the first element of the tuple that is bound to A, whichever side is taken. This is a problematic example. It's essentially the same example as we had in your introduction, because if I pass you some V1, some V2, and only one of them is 0, you can have a problem. But this, which looks rather closely related to the previous slide, is not a problematic example, because these two patterns are disjoint. There is no value that may match both of them. So there is no need to warn here, and more importantly, if you were just to say, oh, I don't care, I will implement the warning, then the people that get the warning in their code are angry at you, and they complain, and you don't want that. So you want the warning to be reasonably precise. Complaining about warnings is a favorite pastime of OKML programmers. So our contribution is an algorithm to detect ambiguous pattern variables. We implemented it and put it in the compiler, and it was released last April. So I know this is a session on the future of ML, but in this case it's like a few months past. And I can make a short demo if I have my Emacs somewhere. Yes. Beautiful. Actually, let's start by putting my font big, and then demo.ml. I have the code that I've shown you before, and Merlin says, when it highlights the orange part with a warning, it says, oh, ambiguous guarded pattern, variable n, something, something. And actually, if you call the OKML compiler, it even says C manual section 8.5, and I'm very proud about that because I wrote this manual section, and I think we should have more documentation on our warnings. Sorry?
We can never renumber the manual now. It's a billion
So, how to implement this warning is what I'm going to tell you about next. So again, very shortly, when this was reported to us by some users, I thought about it on the bug tracker and so on, and I had an idea. I worked a bit on an implementation, and I came to see Luc, who is the expert on pattern matching in OCaml, and in 5 minutes he found a counterexample. So maybe more 2 minutes. So he explained to me what the problem was, and I went back and I thought hard about it. And an hour later, I came with a different, much more complex algorithm. And I went to him. He was convinced after I explained. We started discussing about how to implement it. And then we found a counterexample. And then I stayed in his office, and we worked together, and eventually we got this algorithm, which we believe is correct. And the answer to the question of how to implement it is pattern matrices. And pattern matrices is the answer to all questions about how to implement BLA when BLA contains pattern matching inside. And this is a takeaway in this talk, in the sense that maybe you don't care about this warning, but I want you to understand pattern matrices. So, what is a pattern matrix? A matrix describes a space of values that could be matched that share a common prefix. For example, I have a big pattern on a list, and I'm looking at the sub-pattern that is the pattern on the third element, and I can have a matrix that represents, I'm looking at this third element of the list, and I'm in the case where I matched the outside of the list. I know there are 2 constellations before me, and here is what I'm looking at as kind of patterns. So it's a representation of patterns that is used inside the algorithm to analyze pattern matching. So this is a pattern matrix, and you can see that there are rows, okay? And the rows represent disjunctions, so a value matched by this matrix is a value matched by either the first row or the second row, etc. There are columns. In the right part, that is more like the matrix-like part. And these columns represent the fact that you actually match on several values in parallel, so it's a generalization of a single pattern. And there are contexts, and the context represents the shared prefix of the value that you have matched in the past and you remember. And so I say that all these rows, all these values share a common prefix. So the contexts are the same in the sense that the shape of the context are the same, the constructors are the same, but maybe the variables are bound differently in the context, so I still have one context per row. But you know, you can erase the variables and then you get exactly the same thing. So below is an example. So I have a matrix with true wildcard, and then n and sum of false, so S is a sum and n is none to fit my screen. And then the context I have is twice the pair where the left element is sum, and then I don't know what's inside, and the right element is something. Yeah, the context have holes, and what should go in the hole is the stuff that matches the pattern on the right. And the variable v in the context of the first line is bound on the left, and in the context of the second line is bound on the right. Okay, and this represents a simple alternation as an OCaml pattern that you could write, which is represented on the right. Okay, so if you have a question, you don't understand something, just you can ask me online.
Okay.
Yes, go.
I'm just being pedantic. You're calling this a matrix, but it's really a matrix kind of.
Yeah, but
the context. Is it a question?
Yeah. So the question is, you call it a matrix, but there is this context on the side. So why is it called a matrix? The reason is that when people manipulate this object, they pretend that the context don't exist. Okay. So if you look at papers that use pattern matrices, you see only matrices, but in fact, this is what's happening. Any other question? No. Let's go. So these matrices that represent this space of matchable value, we have operation of them that I'm going to explain briefly that you use when you implement your algorithm. So the main operation is to split a column, in fact not a row, it's a column. You split a column of your matrix. So here you can see that the first column of my matrix, all the rows have a head constructor. So what I can do is, okay, I say, I'm looking at the space of values that can match this matrix. I can reason by case analysis on the first constructor, of the head constructor of the first value. I have n values that are matched in parallel. And so this means that this matrix is equivalent to two smaller matrices that I've represented here. The first one is what happens if you assume that there is a none at the head constructor. So you know that there is none, and then you have to match a second value to see if it matches P12. Or if the value that you are given on the first value start with a head constructor that is sum, well, you must match its inner argument, that is either P21 or P31. And in the context, you remember that the constructor that you match was none. So I argue informally, by example, that the space of values matched by either the matrix on the top or the two matrices below is the same. I'm just decomposed, but I'm working with constant information. And in general, you will have a set of matrices, as below, that represent the space of matched values. Another transformation you may want to do is maybe in a given column, again the left column, some patterns start with a head constructor, but not all of them. So you can rewrite your matrix to get a matrix where all start with a head constructor by saying, oh, X is the same as, well, either none or something as X. And then, because I told you that rows represent alternation, when you have a OR pattern at the head of a row, you can split it in two separate rows. So I duplicate the row, one in the none case, one in the sum case. And then I have a matrix with a column that starts with a head constructor. And finally, my last slide on these things is when you have no head constructor, you know that any possible value that is the first argument will match any of the possible choices. So you don't have anything to learn that is interesting about the shape of this value, and you can just forget about this row by pushing it in the context. And then you have a smaller matrix. And if you repeat this operation, each time you get a simpler and simpler matrix, which leads me to the typical matrix-based algorithm, which is to manipulate a set of matrices. You start from a single matrix that is a single element set. You do this splitting operation that I've shown to you. Eventually, all the matrices in the set are empty. I mean, the matrix part is empty and you have the context. And then you stop, you think for a moment, and you give an answer. And what this is actually doing is to compute a description of the initial pattern as a set of simple, so without any alternative inside, non-overlapping patterns. So I compute a kind of disjoint expression of the original pattern. So I hope you understood what was below, I mean, intuitively, because that's the takeaway of the talk. Here I'm going to show you on an example how it works for our warning. So this is the problematic example from the start with sum instead of const. So you start with D pattern as it's a matrix with one pattern, one row, one column, an empty context. And then, oh, I have an OR pattern, so I can have two rows instead. And then, the first column I would like to split on it, but A is not a head constructor. So, oh no, sorry. I have one column, but both start with the pair constructor. So I can split on the pair constructor. I get two subcolumns, and in the context I remember, oh, I match the pair constructor. Then the A, I want to be able to split on it, so I do this transformation that I have shown to you. A is either sum or none as A. And then I can split on the first column. I could also split on the second column, and the result would be equivalent. And I get two submatrices, okay? The first one on the left is what I have if my value I'm matching start with a sum, and the one on the right is what I have if my value start with a none. That is none, which is why the first column is removed, because there is nothing more to learn about this value. And then I continue doing that on the next slide, okay? I have A on the first column of my left matrix, so I want to turn it into a head constructor, and then I can do the split on the first column. I get two smaller matrices, and the one on the right is the second one. And then I think I'm mostly done. Yes. So on the left, I have only variables, so I can push it, and then I get an empty matrix. And on the right, there is only one case. I can continue doing that, but it's not very interesting. So I show you the final result, which is exactly that. Okay. So, as I said, I'm done. I cannot do any split on the matrix because all the matrices are empty. And now I stop and I think. And I think, okay, if I have a value, it either matches the first matrix, or the second matrix, or the third matrix. And I know that they are all non-overlapping. Okay? And the second and the third matrix do not contain any ambiguity because there is only one possible case. But in the first matrix, I look and oh, I see V occurs in two separate positions. It will be bound to different values depending on on which of the two rows I choose. Yes. Whereas V appears in the guard above. So this is bad. V is an ambiguous variable, and I raise the warning 57. So I'm done. Oh yes, no, that's my last slide. The actual implementation, you don't need sets, you just recursively traverse the tree if you want. So there is a kind of exponential blow up when you explode alternative patterns, but it doesn't show as a space cost, it's just time, you explore all the choices. Most algorithms don't actually keep the context, they keep an abstraction of the context that contains what they need. So in my case, I can actually keep just kind of variable binding positions, and this is the style that you have in the extended abstract. So if you want to see the hardcore presentation of pattern matrices, read the extended abstract. It's also readable, but a bit different. And my conclusion is that it's a work of actually two teams. Arthur Charguero, Martin Clochard, and Claude Marché reported the problem, which is an interesting problem. And then us, that is me, Luc, and Thomas, propose a solution. And the future work is to... oh yeah, I have a bit of future work. Do you have any questions?
So you have a natural interpretation for matrix multiplication. Do you have any interpretation for addition?
Did I have an...
yeah, you have just to transpose the context and you multiply them with the substitution.
I didn't know I have a... So I think the answer is no. It's not a matrix, it's a numerical set, it's just... no, no. It's a two-dimensional array of patterns, so that's why it's called a matrix. But then if you wanted to see it as an actual matrix in a mathematical sense, it would rather be in the ring of booleans, I suppose. I mean, alternatives and conjunctions, rather than numbers. But no, I think I will think about it offline, but in short, no. Yes?
This looks really nice, but I don't think there's anything to do with when guards. Why don't you get a warning?
Oh.
Do they get a warning every time there's the biggest?
This is an excellent question. The answer is that it happens a lot. Oh, so yes, exactly. So this is very nice, but I don't think it has anything to do with when guards. Why don't you get a warning each time there is an ambiguous variable event within a guard? That was the question. So the answer is most times there is an ambiguous variable. It is actually what you want. Because if you write the code above here without a when guard, you want, okay, if you pass a const case, it will be matched. And actually the code, you can look in your code, there will be a lot of cases like that, where you don't actually care which side is taken. The only example I found where this is very problematic is because of the when, and I think the reason is that ambiguous variables are not bad in general, it is the interaction with the when that has a counterintuitive behavior, and counterintuitive is bad. Yes?
Yeah, just a remark. When I tried the new kernel version, running on my code, and then this warning popped up, and I was, since I am a kernel programmer, as you said earlier, I was, what's this new warning again? What does it do? The message wasn't quite clear, so I went online to look it up, and I read it, and then I said, yeah, that's the obvious semantics. I don't see why they need to put a warning. Like
so I can summarize the remark. Louis Gesbert is a very weird OCaml programmer. He has non-intuitive intuition on what the code should do.
I went back to my code and shut my mouth. So it's a useful warning.
Ah, it's actually a useful warning.
With a wrong method.
Does it slow down the compiler basically?
Sorry? Oh, no.
You said it's long in time and short in space.
No. Yeah, I should maybe have removed this remark. The people that work on this kind of, so there are a lot of algorithms inside the OCaml compiler that use matrices. The most important are exhaustivity checking and also pattern matrix compilation. The technique in general is designed not to be too slow. And to also not have exponential behaviors on code that people actually produce in real life or generate by machine, hopefully. So this warning in particular is not at all an efficiency concern, but the technique in general, people were careful about the efficiency. The remark is more like, if you think about it, the trick of, instead of building a set, traversing it recursively is a way to save space, even if you still take the same time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Where is your computer?